New year, new us. Ain't that right, Scott?
I look the same.
Are you going to change up your exercising or anything?
Maybe I'll go with a different haircut.
Oh, you're going to do completely bald.
Maybe.
No shade.
What do you think?
I think it will look. I think it will look good.
That's one of those responses. You look good.
It's good. You look good anyway. I think your highlight is your beard, and that's not going anywhere, right?
No, I'm going to start working that. I'm going to have it grow out.
Oh, even more.
Yep. Maybe I'll braid it.
Oh, yeah? Okay, well, do what you got to do as long as you're not appropriating. Yeah, I don't think I'm getting into much of I don't know. I actually have been back in the cardio and stuff, so that's not new, but maybe I'll maybe push it up a notch or something.
Hats off to you because I hate cardio.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't.
Cardio sucks.
You can't bribe me into cardio.
Well, with the new year, it is so slightly new aspect of Trilloquy, a new theme that we worked out. So how about we drop it? I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is Trilloquy, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. Welcome to 2020. Happy New Year, Scott.
Happy New Year, Garrett.
Actually, we're taping this in 2019, so we're kind of living in the future.
Oh, man. Right now we are. Well, I wonder what my future self will think of this.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, here live in Studio B. Thank you, Scott, for having us in Studio B.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're going to talk a little bit about, what 2019 brought for us and what we're looking forward to in 2020. But first, I just wanted to talk just a little bit about Studio B down here. So you got your brew equipment, you got your guitars. I'm looking at a keyboard. You got your trap set. This is this is where a lot of magic could happen.
It's a man cave.
Yeah, definitely a man cave. How long did it take you to get this space looking all good?
I have been here since 2008. And I would say that it took on this look about 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, but there's still some sound things that, I would like to put the panels up and, to be able to record against one of the walls here with green screen and stuff. We'll see.
Yeah. And of course, the new theme that we're using now was built down here in Studio B. It seems like you got more into your production bag in 2019. That's something that year brought for you.
I did, and I want to start doing sampling and to have buttons that we can use. The problematic button. We need
we definitely need
a problematic alarm. We
don't get that all that problematic.
Realization station.
Okay.
We need a sound for realization station.
You use my bassoon playing as the beep, as the bleep still.
Yep. Let's take a poll. Let's have people DM us on Twitter on what should be the next curse word censor sound.
Oh, like a different sound effect to bleep the thing. Okay, right, well, sure. So, at Garrett McQueen, follow me. My handle is McQueen of the night. Yeah.
And I'm S_B_Trilloquy.
Is that? Oh yeah, that is your Twitter.
SB Trilloquy.
My Twitter has been getting me in trouble though. Like it seems like every time I tweet something that's a little spicy, I'm in someone's office.
Then you're in
the
principal's office.
Yes. But anyway, we all have a job to do.
Give me one.
Okay. So this is what we're doing today. We're gonna keep it real trill today.
I'll trade.
All right. Well, I tweeted one time. I had some Vivaldi and some Bach on my playlist, and I tweeted, sorry about the Bach and Vivaldi. I didn't program this, and I got called into the principal's office. One of the many times I was called in the principal's office in 2019. for the Black History now you get to use that bleep button, I guess. For the Black History special, I included a performance of Julius Eastman's Evil Nigger, and I was in like a high up, like I wasn't just in Julie's
Not
office.
on that floor. A whole different floor.
Yeah, I had to go all the way down to the first floor. But I'll talk a little more about that day later because but you said that you had mentioned one of your problematic somethings from Twitter or otherwise.
I don't have anything from online. I have 27 followers on Twitter.
Well, we gotta everybody go follow Scott. Damn it. Anyway,
So I feel like anything that, nothing would be controversial on there because everybody who's following me knows me.
But did you get called into the principal's office, so to speak, in 2019?
I called someone into the principal's office.
Oh, it wasn't a come to Jesus; it was come to Scott.
It was so you know that I have a really long fuse.
Sure.
Right? That I don't get too riled too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get there, then it's happening.
So
And
tell me more.
There was an instance where I was doing the play-by-play for a live broadcast, and I am not going to mention any names, but I will say that the whole trying to get an interview set up beforehand was bungled. And I ended up writing, by the end, 3 different scripts. And then at the broadcast, the media wasn't there on time. We had everything come together with 3 minutes before the downbeat. And I'm supposed to be going on live. So, yeah, I did some dragging for about 5 minutes.
I want to say names so bad, but
No.
New year, new me. As
Okay.
I said, I'll be a little less petty in 2020 or not. We'll see, whatever.
But I guess that just goes to show you what a good little employee I am. how good I'm ever so good.
So, okay, but what are some of the more positive things that 2019 brought for you? You're getting more into your production bag, doing more of that work. What else?
Hop Notes has started to get some traction, which is really cool.
Nice.
Somebody up at the Duluth Superior Symphony Orchestra in Duluth reached out and they said, we love the videos and we want to know if you want to come up and host some events, as where we play in tap rooms.
I'm going to be real tight. I'm going to be real upset if I don't get to go. I'm just going to let you know. And I know I don't have anything to do with Hop Notes, but I just want to come.
There can be a Trilloquy episode out of that. Why not? Let's get some mileage
Or I can
out
just
of it.
come and drink beer and watch you work.
So, right. So let's do that. So that's very cool. And that's also going to give me the opportunity to actually shoot an episode of Hop Notes up there in Duluth.
Yeah.
And there's just you don't get any other beer like that in the world because they have that wonderful Lake Superior water.
Yeah. And of course, you brought me and Dell to the North Shore for the first time in 2019. That was very special.
I was opening that door to hopefully that you would talk a little bit about our trip.
I mean, you talk about traveling north and getting on the highway, and then you get over that crest, and then you just see Lake Superior, this water that is big, looks as broad as the ocean. And, for me, what I really appreciated most out of that trip was just to get a weekend to kind of just, as you say, lower your shoulders a little bit, just to breathe. And then all the wonderful beer up there, just the carefree nature, the kind of the slowness of small town Minnesota. It was phenomenal. But, I'll never forget stopping at Fitker's in Duluth on the way, and we saw the Duluth ukulele band.
Ukulele chorus.
And what were they were playing? Was it a Joaquin Rodrigo?
They went from Concierto de Aranjuez, the slow movement, into Save the Last Dance for Me.
Okay.
Yeah, they blended that pretty well.
But that Rodrigo Aranjuez is very beautiful in its original form too. Yeah, great trip. One of the many big things in 2019. You know, I made an interesting trip in 2019 to New York, where I got to be on the Need to Know podcast. I thought that was a really fun. What an honor. You know, definitely go back if you're interested in more of a podcast that's a little younger, a little looser, a little yeah. And I got to talk about classical music in my job, and
Sort
yeah.
of set the stage a little bit though. What was it like to record? Shout out all the
Yeah,
members
shout out to Savon,
and
Alex, and
Steph.
Steph. Yeah, Stephanie, my new woman crush, I say on Twitter. So they told me 10 o'clock. And so, on the day I showed up at 10 a.m. and they were like, oh, I emailed. And I was like, oh, no, it's PM. And, we were in there for a while. There was a lot on their docket, because unfortunately, that was the first time they were recording since the passing of Nipsey Hussle. So a lot of the episode was written in or put together in honor of him. But
Right.
I got plenty of space to talk about again, classical music. I picked out a piece of music for each of them to listen to based on their experiences. And yeah, they're only growing. Savon and Alex, another podcast they're involved with, one I listen to every week, the Joe Budden podcast. They were named top podcast of 2019, as far as listenership and stuff. So an honor on many different scales for me to, connect with them, to be on their show, to, have the professional and creative connections with, some of the media that I consume and love to listen to. Yeah, what a great time.
What was the studio like though? I mean, it wasn't a broadcast studio. It was
So in
like
in
a
in
pod, right?
Well, yeah, like in New York, and also when I talked to Jonathan Gibbs, on that same trip, shout out to him. It's like public spaces where you rent not only like little pods where you record, but also an engineer. So you're going
Okay.
basically into a
Cool.
control room, and whatever the cost for
Cool.
per hour is or whatever. So yeah, shout out to again, Need to Know podcast. New York City, one of one of my favorite moments of 2019. But when you think of classical music that has a tie to New York City, does anything come to mind for you?
Well, typically the Bernstein
Sure.
West Side Story kind of feel. But Dvorak was there when he first came over in 1893. You got Victor
Okay,
Herbert.
come on, facts.
You got the whole East Coast school.
Yeah, and then of course you have like Duke Ellington, who was up in New York and Harlem, writing all that music. William Grant Still worked in New York, big music city in many different ways. I think, but yeah, you mentioned Bernstein first, and I think he's the first name that I think of when I think of New York and classical music. The Overture to Candide is one that I hold dear. It was the first piece of music I ever broadcast. My first show, that was the first one. It was on my first and last concerts with the Knoxville Symphony. So
Nice.
kind of bookending my time there. Yeah, really fun, whimsical piece that'll always play an important role in my life. And then as far as work related, APM, NPR related, 2019, I got to go to Capitol Hill. I was telling you earlier about the Julius Eastman and how I had to go into the principal's office. Well, some of my big not yelling, but just some of my big frustration was you're trying to mute the title of this piece of music that I chose for our Black History special. But later on this afternoon, I'm supposed to be going down to Capitol Hill to speak on behalf of the organization for some state funding. Anyway, we worked it all out. It was an honor to go into Capitol Hill and be a part of that. Other things I did for NPR. in 2019, spearheading the first Trilloquy feature, a 24-hour celebration of Black composers, and how that ties in with the holiday of Juneteenth. Yeah, a lot of big moves in 2019 that I'm proud of. Yeah, for sure.
Can we talk about where we're at with the N word as it appears in print associated with the title of a piece of art versus outside that?
Well,
So, what help me to understand why that being censored was a problem?
for me, I just thought about, and I'll in the description we'll link some information about Julius Eastman, but just in a nutshell, a New York area composer, black gay composer, who got caught up into drugs and died homeless on the streets. And he has a series of pieces for multiple pianos, really long pieces of music. And one he named Crazy Nigger, one named Evil Nigger, just musical perspectives on how he knows that people see him in his comings and goings, and how black folks can't be too polite, or can't be too outspoken, and too offensive, going along with the role of the respectability politics built by non-black people anyway. So him titling the piece of music that way, to me, is just a move in the direction of throwing away that respectability. And for me, maintaining the title of that is speaks to the purpose of him using that word in the title, and for me having to fight the battle of not censoring his music in that way, I felt like was a manifestation of the point he was making in the first place.
And how did that go over?
We came to a compromise to where it would be obvious what that word was, but the company has a policy to not put it in print. NPR APM is not run by black folks, so I can understand how it will be very problematic for that to be included. But I'm glad to have had the conversation for so I appreciate that much equity.
Do you think it'll ever get to a point where this isn't an issue?
The N word.
Yeah.
I think it always will be, because the history of it will always be an issue.
Meaning
Yeah.
when it's associated with a piece of work like this, though,
But then
should it be used then? That's all I'm getting at.
well, it's a very complicated and nuanced conversation, because black folks don't really run the big classical music institutions, a lot of the institutions that will be playing this music. So,
Okay.
when we have black leaders at public media and classical media organizations, I think we can dive into that. But, regardless, the music is so important to black history and American classical music. I just wanted to make sure it was never forgotten. It was even and maybe in the last opus, you brought up Killer Mike's Trigger Warning.
Yeah.
A bit of that music is even used in the credits for that. It's just this really angry sounding music that just really portrays, I think, what he was feeling and why he would have used that very angry language to title this piece of music. Before we jump, Scott, too much into looking at Trilloquy so far at the beginning of this new year, in 2019 there were a lot of important people that we lost. The first person I kind of want to shout out is Bob Christensen, because
Of course.
I know that was a pretty trying time for you, considering y'all's relationship, and how long he had been in radio, the millions of lives that he touched, mine included. So
Yeah, and everything in that episode helped me to sort of deal with it and cope. So it was great. That was a great installment. And shout out to Bob Christensen. I was telling Bill Morlock the other night that it felt like a couple times like I caught him out of the corner of my eye.
really,
Yeah, it was really cool though. It was a pleasant presence. So it just kind of reminds me that he's around.
And then, with his, unfortunately, the unfortunate truth is that when someone passes, more people kind of wake up to who this person was, and myself included. I knew his voice, but I never knew him personally or anything, met him once. So yeah, rest in power to Bob Christensen. Along those same lines, really becoming more aware of someone after they die. I already mentioned, Nipsey Hussle passed in 2019. And I wasn't really all that familiar with him or his music, but boy, did he become an icon overnight, not just for what he was doing musically, but the way he was building community,
The business, yeah.
In the last opus, we're talking about Kwanzaa, Ujamaa, community finances and black business and all that. He really embodied that in an incredible way. So I think he's already achieved legendary status. Other legends we lost in 2019, Aretha Franklin, may she rest in peace. I mean, is there anyone who doesn't know something by Aretha Franklin, doesn't know her voice? I think maybe her most wide-reaching song is "Respect." But
Natural Woman, for me.
right, for me, "Natural Woman" is what I think of, and there's all kind of just beautiful arrangements of that tune out there that folks have created.
Before the day I met you, life was so unkind. And you're the key to my peace of mind. 'Cause you make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.
Other folks include John Witherspoon, may he rest in peace. The rapper.
By the way, he was in "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker." You
Okay.
remember when?
Yeah.
He was the minister,
Right.
with the white wife.
Okay. The rapper Juice WRLD passed, and one of his songs actually inspired the marimbas you heard in our new theme there. Someone who's had an impact on my life, Toni Morrison. We lost her in 2019. Are there folks on your list that
From my childhood, Carol Spinney. Do you know the name Carol Spinney?
don't know.
You know the name Big Bird. Okay, so he was the guy inside of Big Bird.
Oh my goodness.
50 some odd years.
Yikes. And what an iconic character Big Bird is.
Right. So, and musically, Rick Ocasek,
Okay.
huge. I mean, everybody knows "Moving in Stereo" because it's been used in so many films, in particular Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I mean, that's probably the number one hit when you call up that song. But they were really, I would put them along with the progressive rockers at the time. They were building songs in such unusual ways. "Moving in Stereo" is the number one example of sort of the way that they were moving sound.
Life's the same, I'm moving in stereo. Life's the same, except for my shoes. Life's the same, you're shaking like tremolo. Life's the same, it's all inside you.
Okay, I'll have to take a closer listen to that. But what? Why are you laughing?
No, I just say, because
I will take a closer listen.
I know, but the thing is when you say it like that, though, I think about the episode when we were talking about LP,
Okay.
and it's just you get these sort of yeah, well, here's some hipster shit.
Okay. I will listen and I will appreciate it. In closing this little in memoriam shout out section, the world lost Jessye Norman in 2019, and what a loss that was. You talked about when we were honoring her and whatever opus that was. You were talking about how at your previous radio station, how she would come through. Her recordings would come through one of those preeminent sopranos
More than anyone else.
and for her to be a black musician, a black singer, validating so many people along the way, and a voice like none other. We called her a soprano, but a lot of the music people actually gave her the voice type of falcon. Did you know that?
No, what's that?
Because her range is so wide, and the coloratura aspects of her voice are so unique that she sings soprano, but the way her voice actually is categorized as falcon, and you can look that up, and all you have to do is listen to her sing to know how unique she was.
You can tell the nation about that, tell them that Jesus has done, and what the comforter has come, and he brought joy, great joy to my soul, and he brought joy, great joy to my soul.
So yeah, but and as we mentioned before, with all of the people that were lost in 2019, something very important was born: a podcast called Trilloquy.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so what we decided to do today, instead of having a guest or anything, was to go back and talk about some of the previous opuses that kind of stuck out, and some of the previous guests that stuck out. I want to start, shout out to Marion, and we'll involve Marion a little bit in when we get to the 1 year anniversary for him being the very first guest, of Opus 1. But I want to go back to Opus 2 for a second, that featured Katie and Delaney from Classically Black. And I remember when we were, forming what Trilloquy was, we were both listening to their podcast a lot, just kind of, seeing how they were doing it. And, I think they're still one of the most unique podcasts out there, classical music as we talk about, but, in a way and from a perspective that we don't share, that I certainly don't even share. They're younger. I don't know, sometimes I feel like they're hipper and
Without question, but you want to add some real fun to it. Listen to the podcast and subscribe to their Twitter feeds.
Yeah, okay,
'Cause
yeah.
That's the little sauce on the side.
Yeah, definitely. And I like to involve myself in their Twitter oftentimes, and I give them plenty of shout
I'm
outs.
staying on the porch on that one.
One of the things we talked about, one of the things I talked about with Katie and Delaney was code switching. How has that idea or that concept sort of evolved for you over the course of Trilloquy? Is code switching something that you had thought about before much?
No, but all the time now. And it's something in my Thrive.
In your yearly review
Yeah.
for work, yeah.
Right. Okay. So, the whole quarterly review thing, you write the goals down that you want to achieve and what you did to reach them and whether or not you did. But I wrote in there, if our audiences as listeners are starting to skew younger, like in particular in the evening, it's down to like 35-year-olds now, or,
Based on whatever Nielsen data or
whatever
they
data
have,
we
yeah.
have. So the numbers are skewing younger and they're listening longer. So with that in mind, a lot of these people listening now, a lot of the listeners now are my age, around my age. Why am I not talking to them like I talk to the other people around me my age?
Well, why aren't you?
Because I was raised up in a radio environment where this is the way you did it.
Or classical radio, you have to sound,
Right. Right. So there's that. And then Trilloquy comes along, and it's this nice, in a way, relief valve. It's a way to come in and say some of the things that are really on your mind, because you can't over the air, either because of subject matter or language, or heaven forbid you should talk past 59.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, you're talking about the clock, like 1:59, 2:59, yeah.
I'm talking about the ability to lose a thought and sit and catch it without worrying about whether or not you're going to hit some timestamp.
Sure. What's helped me on that conversation of code switching, especially on the radio air, is two things. One, thinking about my air shifts the way I think about Trilloquy, just kind of talking the way I talk, but also just really getting into the comfort of just relaxing and talking. Lately, I've been sitting down in the for my shifts more. I used to be a 100% stander upper, but I feel like just kind of leaning back in the chair and just talking to the folks the way I want to talk to them has really helped me be myself more over the air. And there's no denying, and Katie and Delaney talk about this in Opus 2, there's no denying that there's just something built into our experience as Black folk, especially coming up in classical music, to really put ourselves together and to clean up our affects or whatever when we're in those spaces. But as we're seeing, that is changing, and I'm so proud of them. I'm so honored to have them on the Trilloquy roster.
Yeah.
And glad that they've helped me think about how to be more of myself within this genre and this work we do.
There have been talks of a podcast trade. We need to make that actually happen.
I'm gonna see him next month at Sphinx, at the Sphinx conference that you need to be going to.
If they'll let both of us off the air, yeah.
So yeah, I guess more on that later. I have a few more here, but what's one of your standout Trilloquy moments of 2019?
One that I still think back on was David Norval. I don't know what opus it is.
He was something else, wasn't he?
Yeah. I forget. He was 20. Was it?
When I interviewed him, a rising senior at NEC at the New England Conservatory.
Playing with you have a mutual instructor. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so my teacher, my first bassoon teacher, Lacolian Washington, shout out to him. He'll be on Trilloquy this year. He met David Norville at Sphinx, actually, and became his mentor, and that's how we got connected. Lacolian thought that it would be good for us to kind of talk and converse, and yeah.
And he's also, is he either playing or leading an ensemble, inner city?
One of the, and I forget the community in Boston, but an orchestra, that he's trying to help create in one of the Black neighborhoods, one of the Black areas of Boston. But Scott, when you bring him up, I think one of his standout moments, and a standout moment for the podcast, was when he acknowledged classical music as an unchallenged foothold of white supremacy.
That was the hook for me.
Yeah.
And when he said that was the last point where it's been challenged, that's where I went, oh, shots fired.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote a paper about, classical music being one of the last vertices of white power that has been unchallenged.
Ooh, wow, yes.
It's a foothold of white power that has been unchallenged. And I think because of that, because this Euro-American, space that has been created, it's always going to boil back to race.
And I immediately went, okay, so he is at the top of his class. He's playing at a pro level. He's leading these ensembles in inner cities.
First generation American, if you remember.
And I do, and and then on top of that, there's the equity conscious nature that he has. He's going places. I mean, just remember the name.
Yeah, and it's something how playing an instrument can lead you to a place where sometimes you have to leave it behind. I still play the bassoon plenty, but it's just not the principal thing I do. And I think of that for him. And we get all sorts of feedback and letters from folks for what we do on the air and for Trilloquy. In his response to me after I thanked him for being on, he said that he definitely considers me one of the young OGs, and that really touched my heart a lot. For someone who's because it's easy for me to, and you can speak to this surely. I'm 32. It's easy for me to think of myself as in his age category, but he sees me as one of the older guys. But it felt really great. So shout out to David Norville for being one of the real standouts of Trilloquy in 2019.
Who's your number two?
I mentioned David Norville as a first generation American, So was my friend Alex, who plays bassoon with the
Yeah.
Las Vegas Philharmonic. I want to say he was Opus 10, and something he talked about that I thought a lot of people needed to hear was when he goes into the fact that if you are in the United States, especially the states that are along the southern border, and you have orchestras, you need to program in ways that reflect that. He said it a little better than I can.
Here's my answer to that. If you are in an orchestra that is a border state to Mexico, or maybe was prior to, our current situation, a part of Mexico, then yeah, you definitely owe it to your audiences and to yourself to program more Mexican music and make the political aspect be seen. Especially if you're in, California, Arizona, Nuevo Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, like all these Spanish states.
But you know what? And this is kind of an update on Alex. Maybe 4 or 5 weeks after his opus aired, he called me to tell me that ICE was starting to investigate him.
That's
Because he
crazy.
tells the story about how he came to the United States. It's tea that he would talk about as well. He's legal now, but he crossed the border as a child with like false papers and stuff, and his parents had paid X, Y, and Z to get him anyway. So apparently someone heard that opus of Trilloquy and called ICE, and they investigated him, his family, and that left me feeling a way because, of course, if something happened, I would feel responsible.
Right. For broadcasting it.
Yeah. I mean, if you are that listener, well, let me calm down because I'm getting a little.
But at the same time, though, I think that the anybody that did that is the person that needs to hear these stories, and so I think that's a positive.
I mean,
thing.
because it's so easy to paint and not to get too political here, but it's easy to paint the picture of folks coming from the southern border being, however they've been described by certain members of leadership. But Alex came up and occupies one of the most coveted, spaces in the world, a tenured spot in a symphony orchestra. So come on, get out of here with all that hate. That's ridiculous. So shout out to Alex. I'm glad he's okay. And I hope to see him sooner than later. The Las Vegas Philharmonic keeps trying to get me out to sub with them, but my schedule is just so big. I'm going to get out there eventually.
You're right, though. That was Opus 10, if you want to go back and listen to that one. And along the lines of just spiritual elevation, Opus 25 with Nirmala and Bhupati. Oh my gosh. Every single sense was elevated that day. The sound and the way that they presented so colorfully, and she brought chocolate.
I'm gonna keep it true and real for a second, Scott. So that day was particularly moving for me because being on the overnight schedule, sometimes my emotions get the best of me. I was going with it through it with you a little bit. Maybe you just didn't send me a text. I forget what the issue was, but for me to like go into work that day with all of that emotional stress on me, to hear Nirmala talk about the space between and that connection that music has to purpose and spirit and ancestry. I mean, and then for her to come in and have her music to be a part of the Trilloquy catalog. Earlier today, Scott, before we turned on the microphones, we were talking about the different sounds of Trilloquy so far. We've had the Ilharmonica on with some rap.
Singer-songwriter with
Kashimana. Yeah, shout out to her. And then, but to have this Indian classical music, the South Indian classical music included as well, what a gift Nirmala gave to us.
For me, there was a real big eye opener for me when she was talking about how all these different moods that are in this music to create whatever train ride, whatever path you're
Yeah,
on with
yeah.
this, that sometimes you hit a note that in our environments would be considered undesirable. You know, that
Sure.
it's not
Again, the space between, it's
right.
kind of between the Western
And
notes,
it was
scale
almost like,
notes.
yeah, it was almost like her interview made me feel better about some of the music that I was making, and that maybe
So
maybe
you're saying, oh, it's okay to play out of tune.
but maybe if you don't hit a note right on, maybe that's just the note that you needed right there.
Right.
And that it's not don't think of it as undesirable. Instead, it's a part of it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a part of the experience, but you eventually get to point Z, like she talked about.
Yeah, so yeah, big shout out to Nirmala Bodpati for coming in.
And
yeah.
that was the debut of Trilloquy TV too. That's when we started doing video.
Yeah, what inspired for you the idea of Trilloquy TV? I think you came up with that.
In my neighborhood, whenever I take Radar for a walk in the spring and summer and the windows are open, there's a lot of Hmong families in the neighborhood that are playing their traditional music on their instruments. And I thought, what better way to let these people know that public radio is here and it's a spot for you than to incorporate their music.
Yeah, and hopefully we get to do a lot more of that this year, specifically with the Hmong communities
Right.
here in the Twin Cities.
But there's also a large Somali population.
As well,
The
yeah.
Brazilian population is growing.
Oh, really? I didn't know that at all.
Right across the street is a Russian family.
Oh, wow.
You know, yeah. So it's all there, and the idea was to go to them and record their music and then put it online without any language barrier or anything. I think the music is the best introduction to a different culture.
And for me, I think the broader conversation there is not that it needs validation, but validating that music as classical music. That's a big thing that Nirmala was talking about. Indian classical music, that's
Right.
what it is. And how that phrase classical music has been such a challenge, and in the opus of Trilloquy following Nirmala of The Space Between, you and I interviewed Nibal Masood, and Nibal wrote one of the hottest articles of 2019 called "It's Time to Let Classical Music Die." And just from that headline alone, people were feeling away. But in our conversation, I think what we broke down and got to was that again, that phrase classical music and the art music that we associate with that phrase is much broader than traditions say. So more about killing that sort of idea of what classical music is, what it has to be.
It was really interesting to hear him say, if you put something on a program by a gay or a lesbian person and call that inclusivity, there is still just this huge amount of people who identify differently than that still aren't being served.
Right. But and it's equity, inclusion, all of that, diversity. It's not a destination. It's how they say it's and maybe this is appropriate for the New Year's episode. It's not a diet. It's a lifestyle. You're just changing the way you eat. And I think what they were thinking about was changing the way you think about programming, not having the Black History feature or the Women's Month or whatever, but just incorporating it all. But, the most important thing in initiatives and things like that, in his opinion, was this.
I would say just have people of color there in the leadership.
In the leadership,
don't-
okay.
Yeah. Have people of color running the show. It's not enough to have, people of color, like, say, in your ensemble, or have a few that are the lowest level employees. There really needs to be people of color, and people of color who are aware and willing to work for other people of color.
So yeah, what do you think about that point that Nibal was making? You know, it's all about having people of color in leadership positions, people with different perspectives calling the shots. Because let's just keep it trill, we don't have much of that in our organization at your classical, classical NPR.
That's one of the reasons why when the recording project came up, when the idea for the Trilloquy series with Hook and Ladder and all that sort of thing, I really just sort of stood aside and said, what do you see my role in this as?
Right. But then, of course, with my plate being so full, but we'll talk about more about that series a little later. But yeah, again, shout out to Nibal Masood, Opus 26 of Trilloquy, and definitely read their article called "It's Time to Let Classical Music Die." Really, all you have to do is Google that phrase, and you'll find it. So yeah, a standout moment for me for sure, and an honor to have them on.
I have to go back to the Spooktacular for my third.
Sure, yeah, because we were talking about how you got more into your production bag in 2019, and you really pulled out the big the big buttons for that one.
It was just really great to write again.
Yeah,
and
to work with Megan. Shout out to her.
She's great. That was one take.
Yeah.
She read that in one take. I told her what I was after, and she just did it.
Yeah,
but there were a few times where I thought, am I overdoing this? But then
gilding the lily, so to speak.
What was it? Was it your mom that said, before you leave, take one accessory off?
Well, Coco Chanel, but yes, many other women.
Okay, so I just thought that as I was listening to it, I go, okay, so we don't need this.
Yeah,
and that's nice, but it doesn't have to be there.
But you definitely gave us some nice touches, especially our little laughing contest.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm gonna do my stretching here.
All right. Oh, that's pretty spooky. I would hate to hear that in the middle of the night.
That's good.
But I remember you had reservations about writing the story about the Klan.
Do you wonder why?
Well, what is your thinking back on that now? Do you feel justified? What would be your reaction to someone saying that it was inappropriate for you to put that together?
I know.
Really, that would be your reaction?
I wondered about it myself. I also worried about George Mauer's episode. When we had him in to talk about
indigenous communities and stuff.
Yeah, and I copied that over to the drive going, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And
that's me.
It is what it is.
That's me every time. I push the envelope until they push it back. So anyway.
But the reason being is that I think that there are people out there who are much closer to that than I am.
Yeah.
And all of that was just my imagination.
Yeah.
With a couple prompts that you gave. And just like I don't think that my being on the Kwanzaa special was a good idea. I don't think that was at all appropriate. So,
and you weren't. So
right.
Great.
Yeah. So that goes back to
that was the Kwanzaa radio special, by the way, not the
right.
previous Opus.
No, but going back to like Kathleen Bradbury, talking about not seeing the flaws in the system because you're part of the system. And so I've been doing a lot of stepping back and going, okay.
And she was Opus 4, right?
Yeah.
Has some great things to say.
Some of these issues, especially with like getting people to feel like they belong in classical music, are so systemic, and they start way back beyond beyond how your conservatory experience felt.
Yeah.
And like, if we try to trace lines of power, it's like I feel like I'm hearing all of these really great ideas for people of how to be more inclusive and promote diversity, and they're very small targeted efforts, which are great for affecting change on a small level. Mm-hmm. But like, if we trace this through line, we're still having problems at the level above.
So yeah, I've learned a lot on each episode, but I'm also hopeful that my presence here on the podcast is having a positive effect in other non-white hetero communities. You know, I hope that I can be a representative of a possible ally.
Sure.
That's the hope.
Sure. And you know, before I give my final shout out, you know, every single opus of Trilloquy is enormously special in its own way. You know, just quickly, you know, shout out to Quanice Floyd. I think we had a really excellent conversation about cultural and also physical gentrification. You know, that's Opus 14, Go Go No No. You know, shout out to Vanessa Rose, you know, who's been a great resource for us and and someone who has continued to do this work in a different way. You know, Opus 23, Take Me to Church. I really enjoyed going to Pilgrim Baptist, meeting Jacob Dodd through the Philharmonic Orchestra and, you know, retouching on that sort of Black culture. But the final one I wanted to bring up was Opus 15, Moving Through Gateways Part 2, featuring Jessica Majunkins, who was and still is one of Beyonce's violinists. In the prelude to that opus, Scott, we had to address a listener who kind of drew issue with your being on this podcast, specifically being on this podcast, talking about some of the racial equity conversations and all that sort of stuff that we explore. Looking back on that, how do you feel? Because I know that hit you a certain kind of way.
It did. Yeah, it was. I mean, apart from anybody, just I think everybody wants to be liked. I'm not. I mean, I'm not trying to ingratiate myself at all. I'm not trying to get any credit.
Right.
But I am here to help.
Right.
You know, so it's that was my first episode. My first instinct on it was, hey, I'm trying to help here.
Yeah.
I'm not taking the spotlight. In fact, I'm kind of in the back seat here,
So,
which is what I think is appropriate.
So after your hashtag not all white people moments, you know, where did you land on that thought process?
Well, between that and the conversation with Nibal and Devon Gray, you know, our conversation, it's just helped me to be more thoughtful.
Sure.
Out in the world and also in my broadcasts. And I hope that there are other white people like me that are listening to the podcast and taking note, watching me make mistakes and listening to me fall apart. Okay. This is the way, to quote The Mandalorian.
Okay, all right. Another excellent 2019 edition. So shout out to Jessica, man. I mean, a hero of mine. I mean, the work she does, and to be a freelancer in New York, that's horrifying to me. To freelance in New York City, like not knowing how you're going to pay rent 2 months from now, maybe, you know, or not having done that gig or not having gotten that check yet. Ooh, I don't want that stress.
No.
But yeah, she has some phenomenal things to say. Be sure to check out that's Opus 15 of Trilloquy, Moving Through Gateways Part 2. You know, when I was at the Gateways Music Festival and did a little mini Trilloquy series featuring some of the Gateways folks. So yeah, but that was 2019. Moving forward in 2020, you know, we have some big things, you know, on the horizon. You mentioned the Trilloquy series earlier at a venue called Hook and Ladder. You want to remind folks a little about what we're thinking with that?
That is a newer venue under that name. I mean, the building has been around for a while, but I think it was, you know, it might have been a theater, an actual theater before it was a music venue. But typically they do rock and roll, but Molly Mayer got in touch and she said that she wants to do a more classical oriented series. And we've been talking a lot about, okay, so let's this isn't classical in the necessarily the way that you think about it. It can be classic to someone's experience, which is what we get to here on the podcast. So we'll be putting together a march through August, I think, is what we have slated, like on Thursdays or something.
Yeah. So that's coming. Also, a new recording project. So something that I've taken on is the Trilloquy album, in which Scott, we're gonna locate some musicians, many of which who have already been on the Trilloquy podcast, get some of their music recorded, put it on an album, and get that into the regular rotation on C24, on Classical 24, which will in turn get those artists and that music in rotation in radio stations across the country.
Right.
About 250 public radio stations. So
Yeah.
pushing this needle and moving this envelope in as many ways as possible. But in the not so far away future, on the next opus of Trilloquy, Scott, you and I talked to a different Garrett, a guy named Garrett Schumann, a composer and an arts advocate.
Isn't it just Schumann?
Or is it Schumann?
Does he have two N's or one N?
I think it's two N's. I guess we'll find out next time.
So it is Schumann then.
I met him in Detroit. He was in school at University of Michigan. I think that's the one in Ann Arbor. And I was playing with the Detroit Symphony, and we met up for drinks one time and kind of connected that way. He's a big fan of Trilloquy. Reached out about a project he's working on, an anthology of music and musicians, but also writers, researchers of color or from other marginalized communities, for all of this data to be in one place. So that when folks like us are doing research, or other classical music institutions working on more equitable and inclusive programming, they have that resource. So we're going to talk with him a little bit on the next opus of Trilloquy. So yeah, again, Happy New Year to each and every person listening. Happy New Year to you. Thank you for rocking with us. If this is your first time, maybe your New Year's resolution was to listen to a podcast. So
hey, welcome.
Yeah, so welcome.
Welcome to your dry January.
Sure. A lot of excited things happening this year. So yeah, looking forward. In my closing, I'll let you have the last word, Scott, but in my closing, I think that we learned a lot about each other in 2019. Definitely some speed bumps. Definitely some, damn it, Scott, why didn't you put this thing in the bag for, blah, blah, blah. But, all in all, it's been great. So, you often describe yourself as the Alfred to my Batman. But it's great. So Scott, thanks so much. Looking forward to many more opuses of Trilloquy.
This has been, I think I described it first to you as drinking through a fire hose, because I went from being Scott Sleepy overnight to moving to a more palatable shift for me anyway. But just to do this work at the pace that we're doing it, and at the revelations that I'm having every week, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's been times where I've been overly emotional, and maybe you just haven't realized it or anything. So I think that we've hit that point where we can do that in front of one another, and now it's starting to happen in front of the microphone. So basically what I'm saying is that I just appreciate the work that you do, and the dedication that you bring, and all the new perspectives that you're helping me to find. I just hope that I'm doing the same for you. I hope that I'm having a similar effect.
All right. Well, remember, if you want to check out past opuses of Trilloquy, you can check them out wherever you listen to podcasts, or at trilloquy.org. Also, lots of really great videos there for you to check out. And 2020, here we go, causing problems and and shaking the cage. True and real stories from the fringes of classical music. See you next time.
And while I'm thinking about it, I have to give some shout outs to the crew that have helped us get Trilloquy posted each and every week here for the last 32 weeks. Alex Simpson, Evan Clark, Johnny Vince Evans, Cameron Wiley, let me try that again. Cameron Wiley, Ozzy, Michael Osborne, Eric Romani, and Liz Iverson. We couldn't do the job that we do and have it sound so nice without all of their help. So I thought getting ready to go out and record people in the field, I would get used to the process and get an idea of how things would work by recording some of the musicians that come through here. It was a no-brainer.